$828 million grossed globally in the last 2 months, but that isn't from any Western producer. Rather, from 2 Japanese anime films, on a combined budget of just $24 million. Meanwhile, Hollywood has continued to burn money this year, losing around $261 million across 3 films alone. For a name that once meant the golden standard of cinema, Hollywood's recent track record shows that they've lost their way with making stories that land and resonate with large audiences, and may have been overtaken in the process. How have things changed so much, from the days of films such as Avengers Endgame and Avatar dominating the box office globally, to this? The answer starts almost 20 years ago. On May 2nd, 2008, a red and gold suit of armour took up the silver screen as Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man made its debut in theatres worldwide. This was a B-tier superhero, played by an actor rebuilding his career after some very public personal struggles, and paid for by a studio that had put its most popular IPs on finance to other film production studios to make this film. The budget was around $140 million, relatively slim compared to modern film budgets. The earnings? $585 million worldwide. But that's not why it mattered. It mattered because it worked. The story was tight. Tony Stark was flawed but aspirational. An arrogant man, humbled by circumstance, who then becomes a true hero. Audiences wanted him to win in the end. And the movie? It didn't lecture you. It entertained you. However, Marvel then followed with something brilliant. They redefined cinema by popularizing the post-credit scene as a teaser of what was to come. This brief footnote to the film teased a far greater cinematic universe and an industry redefining plan for Hollywood. The plan was beautifully simple. They'd build individual heroes with separate movie releases following Iron Man, building the Marvel world as they did. Each film not only developed the lore, but had a post-credit scene to continue laying the foundations and teasing the next release, culminating in a large payoff with the Avengers in May 2012, 4 years after the initial release of Iron Man. $1.5 billion grossed globally. This was the payoff everyone had been waiting for, and it worked because audiences were invested. They'd spent years with these characters. When they finally assembled, it was more than flashy suits on screen. It was the climax of 4 years of anticipation and excitement. This wasn't just Marvel. Hollywood understood the formula and was already enjoying success for generations prior to this. In this decade in particular, films like The Hangover, Fast and Furious, The Dark Knight, Transformers, and The Hunger Games all pulled in hundreds of millions of profit over the same decade. So it's clear that they knew how to create compelling stories that captured eyeballs and wallets. Why? Because they respected their audience. They gave people heroes worth cheering for. They told stories worth caring about, and it printed money. So what was anime doing whilst Hollywood dominated? Were they even competing? They were laying the foundations for their long-term takeover. If you were a kid in the late 90s or early 2000s, you might remember the likes of Toonami and Cartoon Network. Toonami in particular was one of the earliest anime distributors in the West. Series like Dragon Ball Z, One Piece and Naruto were showing kids that stories didn't just have to wrap up in a quick 90-minute burst, that they could be a long-term story, spanning weeks, months, or even years to be told. They were also teaching an entire generation something Hollywood had forgotten. Animation could tell serious stories, with real stakes, real consequences. But anime was still niche, still the thing viewers didn't openly discuss. The infrastructure barely existed. Viewers back then were part of a small, passionate, but slightly alien subculture. And that subculture? It was patient, devoted, and slowly growing. So, how did things progress during the 2010s? Hollywood saw an even greater run. Marvel grew from strength to strength, with titles like Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, and Avengers Endgame dominating the box office. It wasn't just the superheroes swooping in on earnings either. Movies such as Interstellar, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, and Jurassic World proved that Hollywood was still going strong. They were invincible, or so they thought. In their success, they grew complacent. Signs of forced messaging started creeping into cinemas. All-female character replacements for reboots of series such as Ghostbusters and Terminator, which arguably led to both films bombing and losing hundreds of millions of dollars to the studios that produced them. But this was just the beginning. What was causing them to start pushing various different political messages in such expensive productions? Environmental, social governance. If you're not familiar, here's how this worked. Institutional investors, i.e. groups like BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street, controlled trillions in capital. Studios needed that capital to make films, and these investors made funding contingent on ESG compliance. What did that mean in practice? Diversity quotas, representation requirements, ideological conformity. And here's the thing, this isn't conspiracy theory, this is public information. These companies openly published their ESG frameworks. So what happened? Studios started prioritizing representation metrics over storytelling. Checking boxes became important than craft, and executives genuinely believed there was a modern audience demanding this. Spoiler, there wasn't. The MCU teased this with that infamous scene near the end of Endgame, but in their next wave of films they really dialed it to a 10. That's Hollywood, but how did the anime industry grow over the 2010s? Through tech, titans, and trainee heroes. In July 2012, Sword Art Online released, showing a story about a teenage boy called Kirito who plays a VR game and ends up being trapped inside it, along with millions of others. The premise? The players have to win the game, and if they lose their life in-game at any point, they die in real life too, as the VR headset short-circuits their brain. The series didn't just succeed, it created a genre boom. SAO inspired countless copycat series, virtual worlds, game mechanics, and more importantly, proved that anime could blend genres. Action, romance, sci-fi, gaming culture. SAO somehow managed to capture a plethora of these and blend them into a formula that captivated audiences. Western audiences, particularly millennials who'd grown up gaming, connected immediately. This wasn't just Japanese culture anymore. This was global geek culture. But this was just the beginning. 2013 saw a behemoth hit the screens with Attack on Titan. The first episode of this sees the main characters, Eren and Mikasa, have their peaceful home destroyed as a giant humanoid creature, a titan, kicks a giant hole in the wall protecting them. Within minutes, people were being eaten alive on screen. Attack on Titan was dark, brutal, politically complex, a mystery unfolding across multiple seasons. Then there was the immersive animation, fluid, dynamic, with colour palettes that shifted with the tone. Suddenly, anime wasn't just for kids anymore, it was for everyone. This was mature storytelling that treated audiences like adults. How did this land? Within months, it became the most talked about anime in over a decade, and it worked globally. Western audiences who'd grown up on Dragon Ball Z and Naruto were now adults. They wanted stories that matched their maturity. Attack on Titan delivered. It became a gateway, not only for these historic anime fans, but also for millions of people who then discovered anime through this series. It proved the medium could sustain complex narratives across years and generate film-level revenue from TV. Financially, the series was a major success. Over 140 million copies of the manga, the source material for the series, have sold worldwide. Crunchyroll, the main streaming service showing the anime, reported it as their most watched series in multiple regions. Kodansha, the Japanese publisher that released Attack on Titan, saw its first sales jump in 18 years off the back of the series. Then there was Demon Slayer, releasing on screens in 2019. This was a series about a boy called Tanjiro who, after having his family wiped out by demons, sets off on a quest to not only save his only remaining family member, his sister Nezuko, but also to eliminate the main demon who did this to his family. Where Demon Slayer stands apart from your typical good versus evil revenge story is that the main character has incredible empathy for the demons he slays along the way, and the series shows compelling backstories for the majority of the cast, then wraps it all with theatrical animation quality, dynamic camera work, and perfect music synchronization. The series arrived late in the decade, but it perfected everything anime had learned worked, building on all the prior successes the genre had seen and dialing the quality of the final production to a 10. By the 19th episode, Demon Slayer had broken the internet. People who'd never even watched anime were watching and sharing clips of the series. And the financial impact? Immediate. The manga for Demon Slayer sold over 80 million copies in 2020 alone. Streaming numbers shattered records. Merchandise sold out nationwide. The Demon Slayer train didn't stop there, but we'll come back to that series later. How did other companies in the West respond to this growth? By supporting it and integrating it into their own businesses. Netflix invested in anime, so bringing it to millions who'd never would have tried it otherwise. And the classic gatherings for fans grew massively. Conventions exploded. Cosplay went mainstream. This wasn't an underground scene anymore. Of course, social media amplified everything. A cool fight scene could go viral overnight. Fan art flooded Instagram. TikTok made anime aesthetics cool. This was organic growth. Word of mouth. Genuine passion. So, how did things pan out from 2020 to now? With the tables turning, Hollywood started speedrunning its decline, starting with the MCU and its severe decrease in quality. So what did the once king of the box office do? They started churning out low to mediocre content at breakneck speed. Between 2021 to 2023 alone, there were around 12 different TV series you had to watch to keep up with the story. Suddenly, being an MCU fan wasn't fun anymore. It was homework. However, quantity wasn't the only issue. The characters, the constant political messaging, the stories. Piece by piece, what once made Marvel top of the box office was being stripped away until all that remained was a hollowed husk of what it used to be. Was this just a Marvel-only problem? No, not by a long shot. Countless Hollywood releases have met the same fate. Disney's live-action Snow White became a lightning rod for controversy. From the use of CGI dwarves to overt political messaging about feminism, and tone-deaf remarks from lead actress Rachel Zegler about being paid for every hour the movie streamed. What was meant to be a modern reimagining instead came across to many as a condescending and out-of-touch move with audiences. So, how did the audiences respond? With their wallets and the refusal to watch. Hollywood lost an estimated $133 million on this production, and this marked 2025 as one of the biggest flops of the year. It doesn't stop there either. Tron Ares released recently. It was meant to be Disney's big sci-fi comeback of 2025, but instead, it landed as a costly misfire. The film was supposed to build off of a previously successful iteration from 2010, Tron Legacy, but Hollywood's focus on pushing messaging rather than storytelling has left audiences distrustful of them and unwilling to give them a shot. The film itself isn't as heavy on the message as other recent Hollywood films, but after years of this kind of content, people just aren't willing to sit through hours of a film only to feel like they're being lectured to so much anymore, especially from a studio that's been a champion of this for years now. How badly did it bomb? Well, it lost an estimated $85 million, and with the studio considering retiring the franchise for good, it's safe to say it might be end of line for the series. How widespread is this issue beyond just Disney? Well, plenty of other IPs have suffered the same fate. Terminator, Indiana Jones, John Wick, franchise after franchise, falling. Notice the pattern. Marketing focused on representation, not story. When it failed, Hollywood producers would point the finger at anyone other than themselves. They'd never self-reflect or improve. Rather, they just seem to double down on what's already been failing. And it's not just the way these films are written that's leading to their colossal failures. It's what you see on the screen. The visuals in Hollywood productions have been getting bleaker and drearier over time. Have you noticed? Compare this with this, and this to this. Green screen artifacts, grey, washed out colour grading. This is what tens and hundreds of millions of dollars looks like now. Soulless, drab videos that leave the viewer with nothing more than a sore neck from looking up, and frustration at the time wasted watching them. Audiences have had over 5 years of soulless seminars from Hollywood, and have got to the point where they'd rather turn to alternatives for their entertainment. And what better to fill the visual void than anime? The pandemic hitting full force in 2020 meant that a lot of people were stuck inside at the beginning of the decade. Cinemas were shut at that point, so a lot of people had the time to start watching anime as an alternative to cinema. What were they met with? Not childish cartoons, but deep, complex stories with morally ambiguous heroes and villains that prompted discussion long after the end of an episode. Streaming exploded. Crunchyroll subscriber base surged. Netflix's anime viewing hours grew significantly. Remember I said we'd come back to Demon Slayer? Well, they dropped their next chapter, Mugen Train, on a slim budget of around $60 million in October 2020. Guess what happened? This proceeded to rake in $453 million profit over the course of its initial box office run. This proved 3 things. 1. Anime could dominate theatrically. 2. There was a massive global audience. 3. The TV to film model worked. Hollywood watched this happen and learned absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, anime kept going with other films like Jujutsu Kaisen Zero, One Piece Film Red, and The Boy and the Heron. However, the most notable examples happened this year, within the last few months of recording this. First, in September of this year came Demon Slayer: Infinity Castle. Building on their previous box office success, the franchise made a whopping $650 million at the box office, and has become the highest grossing anime film in history. What made this break so many records? This was the beginning of the finale to the franchise's story spanning 7 years so far. Add to that Demon Slayer's reputation for visuals, compelling storytelling, sweeping scores, and characters that fans had spent almost 7 years growing to love, and you can see how it delivered this result. How do you further break the mold when people are already salivating for your next release? By taking the daring decision to split the finale to your series into 3 separate movies. That's triple the financial success, assuming this franchise continues along the same trajectory. And judging by the first Infinity Castle movie, the other 2 releases will likely be highly profitable as well. Demon Slayer's September release was closely followed by the debut of Chainsaw Man the movie, Ray's Arc, in October 2025. Much like Demon Slayer, the producers of Chainsaw Man had already had a successful first season back in 2022, so knew that there would be sufficient demand for the film to succeed in cinemas. But how they capitalised on this? This was something else entirely. Where the first season was chaotic and focused on action sequences primarily, this film took a relatively short chapter of the story that focused on a new love interest for the main character and blended both genres together. The first half of the film focuses on the quickly developing love story between the main character, Denji, and the newcomer, Reis, using simple scenes, brief humour in line with the character, and simple yet powerful piano scoring to immerse the viewer into the story. This perfectly peaceful take on a blossoming romance is in stark contrast to Hollywood's constant need to fill the void of silence with empty chatter, but more on that later. As for the second half of the film, things snap back to the flashy action sequences the series has become known for, but on a more expensive budget than the TV series allowed for, layering this action with notes from the first half of the film to weave both together masterfully. The results speak for themselves, as at the time of recording, the film has grossed $158 million, made on a budget of just $4 million, and setting the record as the third largest R-rated anime debut in history. What was the response publicly? Social media flooded with posts relating to the film and its emotional impact. People kept viewing it multiple times. Even The Weeknd posted about this film. So, how does anime keep winning with each new release, whilst Hollywood continues to torch their reserves? Through guaranteeing their success ahead of time. Here's the genius of anime's approach. They don't gamble. They don't bet $300 million on an untested concept and pray. They test. They build. They earn their audience. Then, and only then, do they go to theatres. Most anime adaptations start as manga, basically Japanese comics. These manga run in weekly or monthly magazines. Readers vote with their wallets. If a manga isn't popular, it gets cancelled. Fast, brutal, but efficient. The manga that survive, they've already proven that they have an audience. A popular manga then gets an anime adaptation, usually 12 to 24 episodes for the first season. What's the cost? Maybe $2 to $3 million total, sometimes less. This is the real test. Can this story work in animated form? Will manga readers translate to anime watchers? How will international audiences respond? If an anime blows up, to the point of going viral globally, then the producers can progress to the next step, the silver screen. By this stage, the producers are making a film for a hungry audience that's already shown massive interest in it globally. So making the film is less of a gamble and more of a cashing in on demand. Think about it. By this stage, fans have watched 12 to 24 episodes of a series, around 8 hours, getting attached to the characters and their stories in the process. Emotional investment, curiosity around the story. This is lore building, and at this point, watching a film that continues the story isn't just a want, it's a strong need for these fans. When you can produce a film for a fraction of the cost that Hollywood spends on their productions, have it marketed for free by fans that are far more bought into your product due to prior releases on TV, then gross figures far higher than Hollywood's typical earnings per release, you don't just have a successful movie, you have a monopoly on capital efficiency in the film industry. With Hollywood still spending hundreds of millions on movies with new characters nobody knows, tens to hundreds of millions on marketing to try to convince people to care, then releasing their films and just hoping it lands with enough people, quickly enough, the question becomes clear. Are Hollywood running a business, or just gambling with terrible odds? As for anime, their model goes deeper than just the box office. There's merchandising. Anime nails this, having been doing so for decades, to a greater extent than the West achieves. From lottery systems to limited time cafes, intricate figurines to keychains, anime monetizes their fans' interest in their IP far better than Hollywood does at the moment. Then there's the music. When was the last time you listened to a Hollywood blockbuster soundtrack on Spotify? Probably a while back, as most of the music now is just forgettable noise. Not the case for the soundtracks from anime, however. With some of Japan's biggest artists, such as Lisa, Aima and Hikaru Utada, composing openings and endings for the last 2 anime films alone, and songs that perfectly capture the tones set by the films, it comes as no surprise when the music goes viral, catching millions of streams in the process, and creating another solid revenue stream for the IPs behind them. Chainsaw Man's anime had 12 different ending themes, one for each episode, each by a different artist, each matching that episode's emotional tone. That's investment, using music as a storytelling medium. And Hollywood? They spam you with generic orchestral scores that all sound identical. Hans Zimmer rip-offs, composers hired late to a film, temporary tracks in editing that become permanent because nobody has time to be creative. And the result? You can't name a single theme from any recent Hollywood blockbuster. One other thing anime has over Hollywood now is it's a flywheel ecosystem. Manga proves the story, anime expands the audience, film generates the big box office numbers, merchandise creates sustained revenue, music adds another income stream, cosplay and fan content provide free marketing, and the cycle feeds back into itself. Each piece reinforces the others. You know what's insane about all this? Hollywood invented this model. The MCU from 2008 to 2019 was exactly this. Individual films testing characters, building audience investment, then team-up films that would pay off years of storytelling. And the post-credit scenes, they were cliffhangers that made you come back. And it worked. For 11 years, it was the most successful franchise in history. But then they abandoned it. Marvel flooded Disney Plus with required viewing, turned events into homework, made everything connect so you couldn't skip anything, and broke the model that had made them billions. Anime? They looked at MCU phase 1 through 3 and said, we'll take that. And they perfected it. But why does anime's execution work better? What are they doing differently in the actual storytelling? They remember what stories are for. Let's talk about emotion. Real, earnest, unironic emotion. Because where Hollywood shies away, anime isn't afraid of it. Demon Slayer, for example. Tanjiro faces overwhelming odds. He doesn't quip, he doesn't joke, doesn't undercut the moment. He digs deep. He remembers his family, their faces, their voices, the loss. And then he pushes through the pain. And you feel it. Compare this with Hollywood. A lot of films, especially the likes of the MCU, have to underpin everything with poorly placed humour. Whether the characters of a story are dealing with loss, trauma or suffering, there's always some ill-placed quip to lighten the mood for audiences. But all this does is detract from the emotional severity of the moment. Did you know this is a phenomenon called bathos? Described as a sudden change from a beautiful or important subject to a silly or very ordinary one by the Cambridge Dictionary, this addiction of modern Hollywood explains a lot about the forgettable movies of the last several years. When every major emotion is blunted by humour, the result is that the viewer is left without feeling moved, and thus disengaged from what they watched. But why is Hollywood hell-bent on inserting this into as many films as possible? Because earnestness is risky. Sincere emotion can feel cringe if you don't commit fully. So Hollywood hedges. They protect themselves with irony. They undercut. They signal, we know this is silly, so you can't criticise them for taking it seriously. On the other hand, anime commits, and audiences respond. An example of this is with how both genres handle romance. Even here, anime is more honest than the synthetic offerings from Hollywood. In the Chainsaw Man movie, it shows the development between Denji and Reyes. It's not a simple love story, it's connection intertwined with manipulation. But as the story goes on, you realise the lines have blurred for certain characters. This complexity is uncomfortable, fascinating, and an honest tale of how messy human connection can be. Compare this with recent Hollywood productions. When can you remember them doing this well in recent years that didn't feel like a checkbox exercise done by the producers? So let's talk about what you're actually looking at. Because where Hollywood has opted for muted colours, anime brings out the most of the IMAX screens it lands on. It uses colours intentionally. Warm colours for hope and comfort, cool colours for danger and dread. Palettes shift with the emotional tone. Hollywood's terrified of looking too comic book, so everything gets washed out, filtered, dull, safe. And this isn't about budget. Demon Slayer's episode budget was a fraction of what Marvel spends on a single episode of a Disney Plus show. This is about giving artists time, about respecting craft, about caring. So why does it all matter? Because people pay for movies to escape, to experience emotions safely, to see heroism and triumph, to explore worlds different from theirs, to feel something genuine, and to be entertained, not lectured. Hollywood stopped delivering this. Instead, you're presented with a lecture, a predictable story arc, some checkboxes, forgettable music, ugly CGI, and regret of spending time and money on the whole thing. That's not escape, that's work. However, anime stepped in to pick up where Hollywood left off, delivering the whole package. No messaging or agenda, compelling stories and characters that engage your mind. Worlds completely removed from reality. Music that stays with you and works its way into your Spotify playlist. You leave an anime movie satisfied, having got what you paid for. You escaped. So, what will likely happen now? Either Hollywood course corrects and spends the next few years winning back the trust of audiences globally, or continues speedrunning their own financial and cultural demise by putting out flop after flop. As for anime, can they maintain their dominance? Well, they've taken the model Hollywood used to create success and developed it into their own. Unless they let political messaging take over the creations, which I doubt will happen, they will continue to go from strength to strength. And with Japan recently announcing they are planning to finance the industry even more in light of recent successes, the answer seems clear as day. There are other risks too, toning down their authenticity as a medium to suit Western demographics at the cost of their soul. Overproduction to the point of diminishing quality and saturation. Success breeding complacency in future projects. But as long as anime stays the path it's created so far and developed, the chances of these risks affecting them negatively are slim. So, in answer to the question of how have things changed so much with Hollywood's sharp decline over the last few years and with anime's massive upward surge over the last half decade in particular, the answer is that where Hollywood spent billions of dollars and decades of goodwill teaching audiences to hate them, anime spent years quietly serving fans and building trust. Hollywood forgot the fundamentals. Anime picked them up and developed them further. One ignored their audience in favour of forced lecturing. The other gave them what they wanted and built an intricate flywheel to compound the gains. The market responded in turn. The take-home lesson from this is simple. Know your customer. Serve them authentically. Build trust through consistent quality. Stay true to your voice. Listen to feedback. Test before you scale. Work efficiently and never get complacent. Do that and you're likely to win big. Ignore it and you'll lose to your replacement.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It helps others find our content and helps us grow and expand the channel. Turn on notifications so you're the first to know when our next documentary drops. We cover anything that reshapes wealth and influence, whether it's a single person or an entire continent. If you want more, click one of the videos on screen now. I'll see you in the next deep dive.